Now you're asking a young, excited person that wants to buy a place and get into a place, and they're looking and it's tenanted, and it's like, sorry, but it's now November 10th. It's actually got to give notice, and it's going to be effective December 1st. So you don't get to move in until March 1st.
You just sort of have to handle the expectations, basically. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast. This week, we have Robyn Lau back on the show with us. She was originally on there talking about land assemblies, I think it was last time. Correct. This time, we're talking about a subject that's going to be hotter than before and is still fairly warm right now, which is selling tenanted properties and sort of the pitfalls and stuff to deal with around that. So Robyn has sold many tenanted properties, as have I. So let's get into sort of the nuts and the bolts about it. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. The fact that the RTB and government and all the rules changed again. Yeah.
Yes.
New rules, new problems.
Absolutely. So
new problems, new approach.
Great. So yeah, the rules that you're talking about is the differences for now selling a tenanted property. If the landlord is going to move into their own home, it's 4 months. And if it's being purchased, it's 3 that the notice has to be given to the tenant. This was causing some ruckus a bit. Obviously now people have now sort of organized better now, and they seem to be getting a handle on it. Simply for what was one of the main drawbacks to it being 4 months across the board?
Well, it used to be two months notice.
Correct. Yeah.
For tenants if they were going to be owner occupied, like if a young couple were moving into the condo they were buying. But when you look at it, 2 months was good because it's usually what the time of closings are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you're asking a young, excited person that wants to buy a place and get into a place, and they're looking and it's tenanted, and it's like, sorry, but it's now November 10th.
Yeah.
And subject removal is November 18th.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That's 3 months from today. No, it's not. It's actually got to give notice, and it's going to be effective December 1st. So you don't get to move in until March 1st.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you just sort of have to handle the expectations, basically. And I think that again, comes to educating your buyer at the start, just what is happening. So I guess we'll go through a bunch of the from start to finish about selling a tenanted property. So let's do an imagine we're selling a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom condo. Pretty common thing that we have through all of Greater Vancouver. So your owner, who's also a landlord, wants you to sell the place. What's your first step?
Communication.
Yes.
But you and I both agree, no matter what, whether you're acting for a seller, whether you're acting for a buyer, your communication from the get-go. If you've got an owner and you're going to represent the listing on it, and you've got an owner that says, hey, like, good example, it's the fall, but I'm really contemplating selling in the spring. Talk to your tenants now.
Absolutely.
Get them going. Keep it really comfortable and get that relationship back on track if it wasn't already on track.
Yeah.
Get it going so that you're saying, hey, this is where I'm at. This is my thoughts on the property. This is what's going on. And I wanted to give you as much notice as possible.
Absolutely.
I'm also going to give you my agent's name so you can call them, or they can call you if you're comfortable with them calling you. Get a relationship going with everybody so that there's full transparency.
Oh, absolutely.
And you never, ever, we talk about it often, you never know what the tenants are even thinking.
Absolutely.
They may sit there and go, oh, we were going to give you notice in January because we're going to ride it through Christmas, but we found a new place.
Yeah.
Or we've been transferred, or we want to move out of the valley because the cost of living where we're living right now is a lot more expensive, so we want to move out.
Yeah.
Or hey, we're pregnant and we need a new one. Or exactly, they might want to buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. So like communication with a tenant always is paramount. For some reason, people are forgetting about this. And it's also interesting sometimes that I'll have an owner will message me and be like, oh, you need to tell my tenant. They've been managing it themselves, sort of thing. And it's like, so you want a complete stranger out of the woodwork to call your tenant up and
right?
say, hi, I'm going to try to sell your home. Like, that's not a good start. So if you're doing it yourself as a landlord, you talk to the tenant. You have a relationship with them. They're not going to freak out, providing that you don't come in there like a bull in a china shop. Like, just tell them and say, just as you said, here's my plan. I'm thinking about doing this. You know, how can we work with you type of thing? Because like it's quite a jarring thing for any tenant to just be minding their business, get home from work on a Thursday, and all of a sudden, I guess I should get ready to move. Like, that is not a comfortable conversation, and it sucks as a landlord. But that being said, that's what you signed up for. Like,
but the other, I mean, you did sign up for it because it's your investment. But the other thing that's been really successful for me is to go with the owner after they've made that call to the tenants and say, we'd love to come and let me introduce Robyn to you.
Absolutely.
Have that personal face-to-face, so it's not just phone calls, but it also, as an agent, says to the seller, between the two of us, I now get to take a peek at the condition of the condo ahead of time, so you can decide, do you want to do some upgrades? Do you not want to? Because here's my CMA for it. Here's what I think the value of your condo is based on the condition we saw it in, not me guessing or the photos from 3 years ago when they moved in. So it now lets me get a true actual market value condition on it so that I can have that conversation with the seller too.
Absolutely.
About, look at, if you're going to update, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars. If you're going to leave it as is, you recognize that the tenant did do some damage to it, but we can make a better game plan.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the tenants, but it's about the whole entire sale.
Oh, absolutely.
So everybody's more comfortable. The seller now gets on board with actually being a participant in it, and time is money and everything else, but explaining to them too, there's creativity all over the place. As long as we're all on good communication skills, we can accomplish anything.
Oh yeah,
if you throw things at people, that's when people put up the shield and like Captain America, like deflect. Like, I don't want to hear from you. I'll not answer your text. I won't answer your call. That's not going to get you showings. That's not going to get you the condo sold.
Of course. And the thing is that's also when panic sets in, and people don't act normal under panic. So definitely communicate right at the start. Be as transparent as possible with timelines, all these sorts of things like this. One of the things that is also really good to offer as a landlord is that you will sign a mutual agreement to end the tenancy. The reason why this is a benefit is because, you know, most tenants, if they've been somewhere for quite some time, they realize that they're paying less than market rent, you know, because rents generally go up. It's the sad truth. But that being said, they don't want to be sort of held to this, you know, 3-month maximum, you know, timeline. Whereas, like, what if they go out and the first thing they're going to do as soon as they are told that we're planning to sell is they're going to look at a place. They're going to start looking because, you know, it's tough out there and it's hard to find one. You got to adjust, right? Especially if you have kids or a pet. These are tougher ones to deal with because you got to pick your school catchment and find a place that allows for a pet, which again is a whole other headache, but that's beyond the point. So they're going to start searching. But if they know that they have in their back pocket that their landlord is trying to help them by saying, yep, I'll sign a mutual release to end tenancy. That way, if they find somewhere that they're happy with, they can move on their own terms, not waiting to see when, if the place sells and, you know, whatever happens, you know, now all of a sudden they have a 3-month deadline type of thing. Now they have, oh, I found a really great place. Maybe it was 2 weeks after that, and just go like, sure. And then as a owner, just accept that fact. Maybe you'll have to move your timeline up a little bit.
Well, I did a deal with a buyer recently, had to deal with a 3-month, and it was really hard because they gave notice October 10th. Yeah. Well, it was really only effective November. Yeah. So they were going to move in February 1st. But I did, as the buyer's agent, I did an interjection clause in the contract that said, should the tenant vacate early, the new completion date is 5 days after the tenant vacates, because it gives the owner time to professionally clean it, do touch-ups, do whatever they need to in that 5 days. But now my young client, who was so gung-ho, totally accepted this offer and the condo that he wanted versus buying a vacant, brand new, or one that is owner occupied, he now didn't take out tenanted properties out of his search because he was really wanting to get in earlier. So it worked out. The tenants found a place, and here we are. He's moving in before Christmas instead of February 1st.
Exactly. And it takes the stress off of the current tenant. Or at least helps take some of it off.
Well, and that mutual agreement to end tenancy is great for the owners too. It just lets everybody know on an even playing field. We have full understanding. We're all on the same page. We're all cool, and it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's just got to try to help each other out because it is a jarring situation for a lot of people. So,
and sometimes, like you said earlier, tenants will say, well, we were actually thinking of buying a place. Well, guess what? I form a relationship with them.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden I can walk them through the process. I hook them up with a proper mortgage broker if they haven't been talking. And more times than not, they actually can get into a place earlier than they thought.
Yeah.
And there are other sides of it where I've just stayed in contact with them, even for up to 2 years, just feeding them more information, educating them, giving them a bit of a game plan on how to save better for their budgets.
Of course.
Some of the incentives that might be out, some that may not. Even there are times where people say, I want to get in the market, but they can't afford it where they're living. It doesn't mean, and a lot of times people think they have to, so it doesn't mean that they need to. You know what? If you want to stay living downtown Vancouver and you can afford the rents, then stay living downtown Vancouver. But if you've saved enough money to go maybe buy in Abbotsford or Chilliwack, go become a landlord yourself and let the market start making your money.
Yeah, just pay yourself, right?
And pay yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's various things that you can do that will help out a tenant, and a tenant will help themselves with all this. So just basically what it comes down to is at the very get-go, start with the communication.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads up to things. So now we've got the place rented. This is one of these things that as a do-it-yourself landlord, the tenant is permitted to say no photos because ultimately it's still their home, right? And it's privacy and all these sort of things. So make sure as a landlord, once you have your place vacant before the tenant come in, take a photo of it. And honestly, go get the professional photos. You can get professional photos done for probably about $150, something like that. Now, chances are, there's going to be obviously some wear and tear on the place, but most of the time it's not going to be trashed because obviously if it was trashed, your tenant wouldn't still live there most likely. So make sure that you take those photos right at the front, because if you have a tenant that doesn't want to have photos taken, at least you have some relatively recent
floor plan layout, everything.
Exactly. These sort of things, as well as the fact that just make sure that you disclose that the photos are taken prior to the tenancy, just so that no one's thinking that you're bamboozling. Just bamboozling, eh? That's an old word.
Right, you just aged yourself.
Right. But you don't want anything thinking that you're bamboozling them, simply for the fact that, again, transparency and that works for pretty much all of real estate.
Yeah.
Like, just communicate. So you want to make sure of that.
But even as a landlord, that when I go in with them at the time of listing to have those photos to review, okay, it's perfect, it's the exact same, or I need to represent that there's a bit and that during the time that the tenants leave to possession, the landlord will repair what needs to be repaired.
Absolutely.
Let alone maybe an upgrade or whatever that the buyers might want to do. But the landlord will then know, okay, I'm keeping that deductible. I know in my negotiations, I'm keeping that.
Or part of it.
Or part of it. But it's now like they can figure numbers out in their head.
Of course. And I mean, the thing is generally speaking, we all hear about these horror stories, landlord, tenants, rah, rah, rah. But I mean, it always goes back to you only hear about planes that crash. Well, so for every horror story you hear, there's 100,000 non-horror stories of
and
everyone just
two friends,
lived
they told two friends,
right?
So
exactly, right? So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, you only hear about the bad stuff, but I mean, nobody says, "Oh, well, my tenant paid their rent today, and everything was fine, and we were good." Like, that's a boring story for most people. It's a great story for me, though. I love those stories. But, so yeah, I mean, that's what it goes to. Is like if there's some bumps and bruises afterwards. The thing too is that if they're worth the grain of salt, all of the sales usually have an inspection. So you're going to come in and look and be like, you know what? Maybe I want to throw a new coat of paint on the wall before I move in. And most people do. Like most places that I've ever purchased, I paint the ceiling period, whether it needs it or not, because then it's the freshest it's going to be. And let's face it, I sure as hell am not going to paint the ceiling with all my stuff in it. No. So chances are they're going to do some painting anyways. So don't fret too much about the condition after that, and just keep your things updated, basically.
Yeah, I agree.
And that, which comes to another point about keeping things updated. We hear many times people have concerns about updating a place with a tenant in it. If you keep your stuff updated between the tenants, you don't have to worry about it. So that's another thing. This gets you the highest rent that you're going to get. It keeps you happy tenants that care about your place, because if you care about your place, they're going to care about your place.
Well, and if you've taken care of it and not cheaped out on appliances and just gone to some Craigslist or marketplace thing and bought another used piece of whatever.
Yeah.
I have found that if you've put in better appliances and they can see a name, but you're going to attract better tenants.
Yeah.
And then it's up to you to be the proper vetting when you're getting that tenant. But for better appliances, better paint, better furnishing, flooring.
Yeah.
You're going to get and attract a better dollar for your rents.
Absolutely.
And then that equates to the same thing, that when you're selling it, if you've had to bring somebody in and given them a reduction on rent, and then they've now lived there for 3 years and they still have not at all kept up to market value.
Yeah.
Well, the chances of your pool of buyers has just gone down, because now investors aren't going to want to buy your place because they're going to inherit that tenant.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at it, you need to keep improving your property, whether you live in it or you rent it.
Absolutely. That's just the way to, like,
you just own it, take care of it.
Yeah. Just take care of your stuff. And as you touched on, you just get better tenants.
Yeah.
Flat out. Like most places that the owners have kept up to date on stuff, the tenants are just better outright. Pay on time, take care of things, call you when things are getting a little off. We're in the middle of doing some of our checks. We go throughout the year to make sure that things are up to date in that. And most of the places that we go through, the tenants are like, everything's fine, or they'll point out like a cracked light switch or something. But we have that communication again. They're not afraid to say, hey, that's rickety or that's leaking or whatever it may be, because they're not afraid that we're there to get them in trouble. We're there to make sure that the place is up to date, and they enjoy that. They enjoy that we care about where they live.
Yeah.
And that's a really simple thing. And
make
again,
them an advocate, not an adversary.
Absolutely. That's probably like the main point. That'll be the name of the show.
You like that tagline?
I do. I enjoy that very
You can
much.
take it.
But like the other thing that I noticed with once the place is listed is, again, you're going to hear communication a lot in this podcast here, is make an appointment with the tenant as far as like when you can show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people have lives, and keeping a place up to proper showing quality. We're not asking them to keep it tip top 24/7 every day. That's hard to do. I mean, I've got clutter all over my kitchen table right now. I'll tell you that right now. But
it's just life.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like if you talk with a tenant and say, hey, like, can you give us Tuesday in the day, Thursday in the evening, and maybe Saturday or Sunday, can we do that? Work with the tenant. And this again lets the tenant feel that they're still in control of their life.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is what we're dealing with. This is your home.
I try and give consideration to that too. And I'll often say, if you're agreeable to a Saturday or a Sunday and giving me 3 hours, I will do an open house, but also stack showings during that time.
Absolutely.
So I'm the least disruptive to you.
Yeah. And that's what you need to be.
And they will more than likely be thanking and loving you for that. Go, okay, I'll go out and hike, or I'll go get groceries, and I'll do my errands during that time. And I won't even know that you would have been there.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And that's the thing is just work with them and let them be part of the process.
I go through the same thing with them that I do with my owners. Please put away all your private information. Please put away the jewelry, the technical stuff, blah, blah, blah. They feel like then all of a sudden I'm being heard and valued. Yeah. And they should, because whether they're the owners or not, they're the people that have been occupying that and making that space their home.
Absolutely.
It's important. Like, I think we often as the public forget and say, well, it's tenanted. No, it's a family's home and residence.
Absolutely.
So give consideration. Would you do the way that you're talking or treating them? Would you expect somebody to do that to your daughter or your son or your parents or whatever it is? do unto others, right? And it goes a long ways. It
Oh,
goes
absolutely.
a long ways.
Absolutely. And a caveat with that as well is obviously always give 24-hour notice, check with the tenant. That should be a given. If you didn't know that, now you do. But I also always make sure to share with any tenants when the showing's coming, like if you can't do a showing, that's fine. I mean, within reason. Don't say like no showings, period. That's not going to work. But if you can't do a showing, you're sick, kids home, sick, families in town, whatever it may be, right?
Stuff happens.
It's okay to say no, especially because if that buyer was actually serious about buying the place, they'll reschedule. And if they don't reschedule, you probably just saved everyone from wasting their time anyways.
Pretty much.
So does it like work with the tenants? And we do have some tenants that listen to our show, I know for sure. So like, don't be afraid to say no. It's okay. It's not like you're blocking all the showings and going to get yourself evicted for not allowing for showings. Like just because you can't do it on Tuesday, say, hey, can you maybe do it on Thursday? Like that's absolutely a fine way to go about it. And I did.
Well, if you've created that relationship with the agent too, then they have the ability to say, hey, I know I committed to you Tuesday and Thursday, but next week, Wednesday and Friday is going to be better. That's amazing. We'll totally work around it. Just keep that flow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just
life happens, work schedules, life schedules, everything happens and changes. You want to entertain on the Thursday night with some friends from out of town? Great. I won't do any showings and it's not going to be a bother to me.
Exactly.
But if you can tell me I can do it Wednesday, it'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that doesn't mean just like everybody kind of just try not to step on each other's toes, really. Like you're dancing. Just don't step on each other's feet.
Yeah, I've seen you dance.
I'm a white guy. What do you expect? So you're going through that with all the showings of that. And then the other thing that I have found people run into problems with is after all the showings are done, again, with the communication, tell the tenant you're done. The amount of times I've heard tenants say like, hey, the realtor didn't tell me that they were done. And I'm like, oh, well, that's stupid. So the tenant has been outside in the rain, just chilling, trying to do their best. It's like, just tell them you're done in their home, man. Like, that's something that should just be, again, back to the communication and that. As well as, like, when you're selecting your realtor, make sure they know what the rules are for tenancies. A lot of realtors I have seen who come in and they just don't know the rules. So they'll say, oh yeah, don't worry. The rent's a little bit low, but you can just ask the tenant to leave and then they go and then you can charge a higher rent. And I'm just looking at them like, are you stoned? Like, no, that is not how it works. Like, just make sure that they...
Far from it.
Yeah. So, like, make sure they know the rules. Maybe get a dual licensed realtor. No. Self-plug.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
But yeah, I mean, you got to make sure that when you're interviewing your realtors, which everybody should interview the realtors, both on the buying and the selling side, at least 3, just make sure that they know are up to date with what the rules are for tenancies, because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. Like if you have an ill eviction or anything really against the rules, like you can get up to 12 months worth of rent as damages. And rents are all sitting around, let's say an average of $2,500 to $3,000. So you do the math times 12.
Yeah. Like that one property that I got involved with. It was a 4-plex.
Yeah.
Do that times 12.
Yeah. Like you're going to hurt. So make sure that you know the rules.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's not a pretty thing. And dealing with the RTV, if you're new at it, it can be unsettling. Instead of being aware of the rules and being aware of how to handle it, it's just another part of your job and there's confidence.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you're not, you're stumbling, the transaction's stumbling, your clients are going to be the ones that are financially hurting because there will be penalties coming down.
Yeah.
And
not to mention
the RTV loves to throw them out.
Yeah.
So throwing out penalties and all kinds of things, it's completely unnecessary if you know what you're doing. But it's the same with any kind of real estate transaction. I'm just going to put that caveat out there.
Yeah.
If you're an investor wanting to buy investment properties, Ask the agent how many houses they've actually bought themselves and how many investment clients they've got and what they know about cap rates and everything else. It's the same with dealing with your tenanted properties.
Yeah.
Do your owners understand that it's okay to be a little bit underwater, but not too much? There is a sweet spot.
Yeah.
Some of it's taxable benefit to you, but the market value versus your decreasing mortgage. There's so many conversations to have with tenanted properties.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Speaking of cap rates, can you tell our listeners in a high overview what a cap rate is?
Oh, Lord. Okay. So we're going into this now.
That's a little bit. And
it's year over year, you should understand what your investment property is actually doing.
Yeah,
so when you take what your investment is versus the margin that's been created by market increase or decrease, you can be above or you can be below, but it's taking your product value plus the increase, we'll say. And let's say that the market itself increased 10%. And then if you're only going to base it on that one figure, that's your cap rate. You've now increased by that much. But the real cap rate on it is the decrease in your mortgage. So the actual equity sitting in your property versus what you're going to sell it for. That's your final cap on your product when you go to sell it. But if people want to do an assessment on that, investments doing like standard 4% year after year after year, that's based on the ups and downs. And that's also based on, let's say that the tenant needed a new fridge and they had some issues and they had a couple other things and the building then had a levy. So now all of a sudden that year was lower, but the following year, there was nothing. It was sweet. The market went up. You got 10. Well, year over year, you're doing your law of averages.
Yeah, just sort of bounces along.
It does. It's like a stock ticker.
Yeah.
So you do need to understand it's always about the deductions that you take off of it versus what you've made in the marketplace should you choose to sell it at that date. And that was your actual sale, not your dream in your mind. We all know that a lot of times sellers will say it's worth $600,000 for a 1-bedroom in, let's say, the Tri-Cities. Well, it's more 530. So let's do a realistic conversation here. And then I can tell you what you're capping at. But it is always remembering the deductibles, not just the whole profit.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to make sure that you look at all the numbers. And a lot of people tend to just stick their head in the ground about that.
Well, it's the same thing when people say, oh, yeah, I can totally, this tenant, if they paid me $2,000 a month, my mortgage is $2,000. Okay, you just forgot your strata fees and you forgot your taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you've got that, you're actually way underwater.
Yep, you are behind. The thing, too, as well, is to look at that is, we do hear some landlords, it's hard to cover the nut, is the term that we use in the greater Vancouver area, which is basically covering everything you said, covering your mortgage, covering your taxes, covering any bills that you incur, that sort of thing. But that being said, some people I see are dragging $200 and they're concerned about that. But if you're dragging $200 over 12 months, it's $2,400. Let's say on average, we're not taking it to every single bit. But I mean, are you going to get that 12 months worth of dragging the $2,400? Has your property gone up in price that much for the year? Probably. So don't worry about it too much. I mean, it's not,
unless you're selling it, you're not losing.
Exactly.
That's what people are like, I lost money in the market. Well, are you selling it today? No.
Yeah.
Are you going to sell it in 5 years? No, I'll probably hold it for 10. Then the day that you go to sell it is the day that you assess it.
Absolutely. Or when you're taking out equity to build whatever it may be. But that's what I'm saying. I think a lot of people are so focused on trying to hit that zero level, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. That would be ideal. But in the lower mainland, that is real difficult, if not impossible.
Here's another little side note for those investors out there. Very, very often I see investors talking to their broker, their mortgage broker or their bank. You should be dealing with a mortgage broker. But because they get rent once a month, they agree to then have a mortgage for a monthly payment.
Yeah.
That's the dumbest thing that you could do in any real estate because the banks, it only works in banks' favor.
Yeah.
Do an expedited bi-weekly. Now you're all of a sudden making 2 full principal payments every year.
Yeah.
Just set up your account so that when the tenant's rent goes in, do a separate account so that that's all it goes from. But the biweekly payments are covered under the tenant's rent. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden you've dropped 2 full payments into principal every year. Yeah. Well, now your margin just got really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because your mortgage payment is going down. And if you are doing a long hold on this tenant property,
which
when you go to renew your mortgage, maybe for the first 5 years, you might be $200 underwater. Mm-hmm. But because you did those expedited biweekly payments, you actually aren't. Because when you go to renew your mortgage, all of a sudden that tenant's rent is totally covering the nut.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing, is that real estate investing is not like TV. Like you see these, like you change the whole kitchen during a commercial break. No, it's not how this works. Especially like if you're trying to do it properly, you should be ready to be in it for the longer run and just slow and steady. It's not a super flashy, sexy investment, like crypto or some nonsense. It's slow and steady. It's doing those general moves, sort of like if you invest in the S&P 500 or something.
Well, I tell people you've got a stock portfolio, and they go, yeah. And I said, well, then you're going to create a real estate portfolio.
Yeah.
And that real estate portfolio, just like your stock portfolio, let's say you made an investment in stocks, mm-hmm. and then you decided to say, okay, I put $3,000 in, but I'm up to 9 in that stock. Mm-hmm. Pull out your original, and you're going to let the rest ride. So you're not losing anything. With real estate, just like Haze mentioned earlier, the longer you hold it, the more equity you've got in it. Pull the equity out, buy another property. Now that property is making you more money. Mm-hmm. And it goes full circle back to deal with an agent that understands this.
Absolutely.
Because that's creating financial wealth in real estate. And we are financial real estate advisors.
Yep, basically. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately just...
That's why having this conversation about creating a relationship with your tenants mm-hmm. and going through the process of selling one, it's all about communication. The entire thing we do is about communication.
Absolutely. And that is the best way to sell a tenant property, is to communicate well, work with people. And admittedly, there are things that will go outside. Sometimes people just want to fight. We can't guarantee that it's always going to be smooth. I understand that. But I would say just for most of any transactions, as long as you're respectful to one another, it will work out fine. Don't come in like a bull in a china shop and just, we're going to do this, because you're dealing with someone's home and people will get defensive about their home. It's human nature, right? Yeah. So, I mean, really what it comes down to is just for tenanted properties, I guess in a nutshell, is find a realtor who has been selling tenanted properties before, works with investments, knows the rules, knows the laws, would be important, and is high in communication.
And knows what RTB stands for.
Yes, and knows what RTB stands for as well. So you want to make sure that if you find these things in your realtor and you'll be able to work with your tenant in a smooth and effective way, you will likely not have any troubles. So.
Yeah, and with this new going from 2 months to 3 months mm-hmm. for buyer occupancy, it really can just shorten your pool of buyers, because a lot of people aren't willing to wait, or it doesn't work in their time frame.
Yeah.
Get that communication going. Like we said, if you did it and you already knew a few months earlier that you were going to sell, tell the tenants. You may end up having a beautiful vacant property that you can bring all those buyers back to the table now in your pool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think we covered basically everything for selling tenanted properties, at least a high overview. If someone's trying to find you and talk to you more and get really into the nitty gritty about it, where do they find you?
Call me or find me on my website at www.robynlau.com or 604-306-3915. Had that number for 35 years.
That's a long time.
So it's not changing. You can still find me.
Nice. So we'll have that information all in the description below. If you've been listening this long, thank you very much for tuning in. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for putting up with us.
My name's Haze. This has been Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast.